Hello, hello. How are we doing today, everybody? Welcome to Coffee with Connie. Thanks so much for tuning in. I know I have been off the radar for a little over a week, and I apologize, but I just really needed to unplug. You know how sometimes things steamroll down the hill and just really get caught up with you. And I just had so many different things going on at one time. I just really needed to unplug. So I apologize for not coming to you live over the past little over a week. I know I hardly posted anything. Had some informational graphics we had out there and some of the other regular things that we do tuning in, but I didn't have Coffee with Connie or any of the live conversations that I like to have with you, and I apologize, but I really needed to unplug. And so as I talk to people and recommend to them things that we do to try to get more information out there to you, one of the things I always say is make sure you're on a regular schedule so that the people tuning in know when you're going to be on live, and so they know when to tune in. And unfortunately, I didn't give you any warning. I just unplugged. And so sorry about that, but I feel fantastic. Life is good, and things are really going crazy. And so I recharged and a lot of good information. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for checking in too. If you're on with us live, say, hey, let me know that you're on live. Just type live in the bottom would be great. If you're tuning in on the replay, do that as well. And feel free to ask questions. You know, one of the hardest things for me is coming up with information about things that you know, that you may have questions about that I'm not really sure that you have a question about. So hey there, Paulette. How are you today? Hey, Tony. How you doing? Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hey, Ashley. How are you? Thank you guys for taking your time out this morning. So as we talk about recharging and getting more information, one of the things that comes up a lot when we are doing closings is that people don't understand why we need some of their information. So why some of their personal information? Why do we need to know about the loans that they have? So usually I talk about the buyers because the buyers usually have the more involved role in this whole process. But today I wanted to talk about the seller for a minute because the seller has a big part of this process as well, because if we don't get everything taken care of properly for the seller can't sell the home to the buyer, and the buyer's not going to get a home that has the proper protection and isn't what they expected it to be. So, hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Hey Pam, how are you? Good morning, Melanie. How are you? I know some of you guys are on vacation, and thank you for taking the time to tune in as well. I know that's kind of tough, so I appreciate your time early this morning. So let's talk about the seller side for a minute, because when the seller actually decides to sell their house, you know, there's some things that they've got to resolve as well. And when they are presented with a contract and they're reviewing the contract and trying to make sure if it's going to work for them, and they're working with a good real estate professional that knows the tools to make sure that the all of the pieces of the contract fit the needs that they have. Not only what they're going to walk away with as far as cash is concerned, but also to make sure that all of the pieces that they expect to happen are going to happen properly. So that's an important part of the process. And then after the contract's written, the seller kind of has the big job of packing up their house and making sure all of their paperwork is where it needs to be to move on to the next part of their life. But one of the things that needs to happen is the company that's doing the closing is going to need to be in touch with that seller to make sure that they get all of the information about the property that the seller knows about. So when we talk about loans that you have on the property, if you're selling a piece of property or if you own a piece and you haven't decided to sell it yet, something to keep in the back of your mind is, first of all, when you're packing up all those boxes, don't pack up all of that paperwork yet, because we're going to need some information off that paperwork. And without it, sometimes it makes it a little bit complicated to get the pieces that we need to make sure that the closing's done properly. So don't pack up your loan information on the house that you're selling when you start to pack. And what's going to happen is we're going to have a conversation with you as the seller talking about the loans that you have on the property, loan or loans. And what I want to talk about this morning is let's talk about that a little bit, and then let's talk about why we need those things and what some of those nuances are. Hey, Tony, thanks so much for saying that. I appreciate it. And, you know, hugs to all of you guys. I know there's a lot going on there. So thanks for taking your time and thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. All right, so if you're selling your house and we, as the company doing the closing, asks you, we need to know about those loans that you currently have that are secured against your property. Now, you may be thinking, wow, I got a loan when I purchased my house, and so yeah, I understand I need to pay that off. But you may have gotten a home equity line, and a home equity line may be something you went and got from your bank. So let's say Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Maryland National Bank, Old Line Bank, First Virginia, Bank of Tennessee, all of any of your banking institutions that actually do a home equity line. A home equity line may not even in your mind sound like an equity line because it may be something that you borrowed against the equity in your home so that you could buy a car or so that you could buy a boat or so that you could do improvements on your home. And so you borrowed it against your home because you had equity and you wanted to be able to use that tax write-off to buy that vehicle or buy that boat or buy that item or have college funds for your children. So you may have borrowed that money out of the equity of your home so that you could use that as a tax write-off, because we all know car loans years and years ago used to be tax deductible, and the interest on them, but they're not any longer. So a lot of people do borrow against the equity in their home to be able to purchase some of these things so they can use that tax benefit. But what that means is when you go to sell that home, you have to pay that loan off because it is secured by that property. So any loan that you've taken out that you had to sign against your home must be paid off when you sell that property, because that property is being transferred to someone else. You no longer will own that property, and that new buyer doesn't want to take over your loan. So I know that sounds silly, but that's exactly what happens if it transfers, is the new buyer then has purchased a piece of property that has a loan on it, and so their ownership rights aren't protected. So we're going to ask you exactly those things. So who do you have loans with? And then we're going to need some information about those loans. Who do you pay it to? Maybe some contact information about them. Although if you're working with a title company who has been around for a while, we do have a lot of those contacts already stored. But any of that information is very helpful. We're going to need to know your loan number. Very important. Can't do anything without it. And then typically we're going to need the last 4 digits of your social. Oh my gosh, why do we need that? We can't do anything with the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, but we need to contact that lender to get that exact payoff amount so we can make sure that loan's paid off. And you may say, well, I'll go ahead and contact them and get that information for you. Absolutely great. And we will take that payoff information, but we have to confirm with that lender that that amount is correct. And again, we're going to need the last 4 digits of your social. Why do we have to do that? Well, remember I said we are going to, after the closing, do an insurance policy that actually protects the ownership interest of the new buyer and their mortgage company. That's why they hire us. And so in order to do that, we have to guarantee that we are paying off that full loan. And if you give us a payoff statement, but then we can't call and confirm it, you maybe stop paying it on a mortgage. Maybe it's an older statement that doesn't have more recent information. So when we send that payoff amount to pay that loan off to that lender, they're not going to accept it because it's not a full amount. And then we're in a quandary because we have a loan that's not paid off. We can't protect the ownership interest of the new buyer. So we have to get that information. So we're going to need the last 4 digits of your social. We're going to need the loan number and the contact information for any loans you have on the property. Now with that, let's talk about one other thing. Let's not say a home equity loan. Maybe when you took out your mortgage and when you bought your house, you did a first and a second at that point. There's some loan programs out there that are really interesting and appealing because of the way that they're structured, but it's a first mortgage and a second mortgage, so you actually do have 2 mortgages that have to be paid off. Maybe during the housing crisis issues, you did the government had a program called HARP or HAMP or a lot of different acronyms, but basically what it did is helped you bring your loan current if you got behind because of a personal situation, a job situation. It actually helped you bring that loan current by giving you or paying to your current mortgage company any outstanding balance that was in arrears. And so it was a loan, and there was some significant terms in the loan. You didn't have to make any monthly payments on it, and if you kept the loan for a certain period of time, then it would be excused when you sold that property, and you wouldn't have to pay it back. But it's not, because it's not a second mortgage that you're actually making payments on. A lot of sellers are confused that that's an actual loan that needs to be taken care of, addressed. Even if it doesn't have to be paid off, we have to contact them and we have to get that loan released from the property. What happens is a lot of the first mortgage lenders are telling their sellers, hey, you don't have to worry about it. It's collected with this payment, and when our loan is paid off, that one will be paid off. That's absolutely not true. And the confusing thing is typically they were made by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. And so you would think that the payment or the contact information would be HUD. It absolutely, in most cases, is not. There's a company that does what's called servicing it, and that company actually manages the payments, make sure they get to where they belong, manages making sure those loans get paid off if there's no payments due. So it's a servicer or a company that manages that process, and that company is scouring and making sure all the time that those loans are getting paid off, if the property is sold, that they're getting released, and they're tracking down people immediately after these closings because they're tracking that first mortgage getting paid off. And so now you've got a second mortgage that may require a payoff, and even if it doesn't, it's got to get released. So if you've done any of those kind of things, any of that kind of financing, you need to say something out loud to your realtor, to who's doing your closing. Typically, I would recommend who's doing your closing. Have that conversation. Hey, I did this 4 years ago, and I'm not sure how it works. I don't make any payments, but this is something that I did. Hey, that would be really helpful. Now, you may ask, we do a title search, and so we should be able to find out these things. Absolutely we do. And what helps is if you come to us with the information before we find it, only because sometimes, particularly at this time of the year when closings are happening much more quickly because people want to get moved, purchased and moved while their kids are out of school. So we're trying to rush through a lot of things. And so we're ordering a title search, and sometimes it's not coming in until soon, close to when the closing is going to happen. So then the lender who we're getting that payoff information from may require a certain amount of days before they can actually get us a statement that can hold up the closing. So if you know these kind of things, come out and say, hey, I'm not really sure how this works, but here's something I have a question about you may need to know about. Now, when we do the title search, we're going to find out that there are some additional loans on the property. And if you don't understand it, we're going to contact you either way and say, hey, look what we found. Tell us about this because you didn't tell us about it before. So maybe there's something we've got to work out. But if you do know about it or you just aren't sure, reach out to the company who's doing your closing and just have that conversation with them, because they can definitely help you navigate through it. And being proactive will try to keep the closing on track like it's supposed to be. So hopefully I gave you some information that was helpful today. Thank you guys so much for taking your time to tune in. Really good to see you guys this morning. Good morning, Nicole. Hey, Gary, how are you today? Congratulations on your retirement, sir. One thing I wanted to point out, as I try to tell you all the time, most of the information we talk about is not state specific. But I will tell you that Foote Title Group is licensed in Maryland and Virginia. We can do closings all over both states. We have offices in both states. The other thing is there's lots of great information on our website. So go to our website, www.footetitlegroup.com, and go to either, if you're a buyer, the buyers tab, sellers tab, realtor, lender tab, scroll down to resources. There's all kinds of information on there. If you're buying a home, there's a buyer's guide, there's sample closing documents, which no one lets you see in advance. We've put something like that together. There's a seller's guide that gives you some ideas and things that you may need to know. Lots of resources and information on there. And subscribe to our email list, because once a month we put out a new piece of information that has like a checklist or a rundown of how to do certain things. And so it gives you lots of information to stay in touch with what kind of things are out there and what kind of questions you may have. Hopefully we're answering them. So I love to be able to provide you guys information. My word for the year is execute, and execute means that I'm providing you good information every single week and hopefully every single month. And hopefully I'm able to help you out with something. If you have questions, please, please, please either message me through on this broadcast. You can message me individually. You can email me. All of our team members' emails are on our website. You can email any of them for any questions in Maryland or Virginia, or an overall question. If we don't know the answer, we can hopefully direct you in the right direction. So thanks so much for taking your time to tune in. I really, really appreciate you. My name is Connie Fuksa. I'm with Foote Title Group, where we protect your home ownership, and I will talk to you again soon. Have an awesome day, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.